Hello, and welcome back to the Security Spotlight podcast. My name is Max Robidoux from the portfolio marketing team here at Dell Technologies. Last week, we left off talking about security and Gen AI and how it's a kind of a double-edged sword. And this week, we're diving into another interesting topic here on security and diversity. Joining me today on today's podcast is a very special guest, Liz Green. Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Max. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, me too. So Liz, obviously, thanks for being on this episode today. Before we get started, could you please tell us just a little bit about yourself and give us a little background?
Yeah, absolutely, Max. So for those that don't know me, I'm Liz. I actually live in London, but I am American. I spend my time with our European clients, helping them build greater levels of cyber resilience and looking for ways to better respond and recover from catastrophic cyber attacks. I also spent a lot of time in the market working with different partners of ours to build ecosystem responses to cybercrime and ransomware. Work a bit with the regulators as well to make sure our solutions are meeting the needs and demands that they put forward and provide. So have a few different hats that I wear.
Awesome. Well, we're lucky to have you on the podcast today. So let's jump right into it. So Liz, I know this topic is very near and dear to you, and a lot of times when we think about IT or when we're talking about IT, it's all about people, process, and technology. And oftentimes we really focus on that technology element. Sometimes we get into the process a little bit, but I feel like we forget to talk about the people aspect of it a lot of the times. Could you elaborate on why the human element is such a critical factor in cybersecurity?
Well said, Max. I think we do tend to over-rotate on the technology, although it is important. The people and human element is a critical factor in building a more cyber secure world, and there are a few reasons for that. I think what we've found is that often the biggest threat to an organization can be their people. And this can come in many forms. It could be the unintended actions of a well-meaning employee, which results in a negative event. And this can be in many forms. So phishing attack, an employee falls victim to an email or some sort of social engineering, a weak password that can be accessed by some unauthorized user, just lack of security awareness. So making poor security decisions like downloading a malicious file or neglecting standard security protocols, mishandling sensitive data. So, that is kind of one bucket. We also less likely, but also, see the intended actions of disgruntled employees or employees with malicious intent who can look to intentionally leak sensitive data or take down systems and services. So developing teams of employees that are cyber safe and having business leaders who understand the problems and invest in the appropriate safeguards and technologies, those are critical components to building greater cyber resilience. And again, are all really focused on the people.
Yeah, completely understand. And just bringing up, I think the recent Verizon report, it had, I think it was 74% of breaches involved the human element. So like you mentioned, that includes like social engineering attacks, errors, phishing, things of that nature. So it's a pretty staggering number when you really step back and think about it. So kind of going off of that a little bit. So we recognize that the human element is a big piece in cybersecurity. So looking towards the future, what should a cybersecurity team of the future look like to kind of combat this a little bit?
Sure. So, Max, it is my hope and the hope of many that we see much more diversity in the field of cybersecurity. And this should be diversity of gender, of ethnicity, of age, of thought. And if we fail to bring more people into this field, and if we fail to bring different people from different backgrounds, from different, points of view, we're going to really struggle to solve this problem. And really this fight that we have against cyber crime. So to truly build resilience and identify smarter ways for us to protect and safeguard our digital world, we need teams that think differently and that can consider a broad range of potential risks and potential solutions. So it's not going to be able to be done if it's a field of majority white male cyber thinkers. So if you're listening, don't walk in a cybersecurity role. We need you. this is not necessarily a field that should just be for people that are hyper technical either. There was a recent FT study, again, don't quote me, it was an article rather, talked about this 3 million person gap in the cybersecurity field, and actually how a majority of that gap is really calling for people that are not techies, but actually people who have the ability to problem solve, that actually are a bit more business minded, that understand the technical problems and can translate those into the business. So really, it should be a field for everyone. And we're not going to be able to solve this problem without, having a diverse group of people together solving it. So that's what I hope the future looks like.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I think that's extremely important, like you mentioned, not only looking at it from like the diversity inclusion aspect, but looking at it from kind of everyone in a different background, having their different perspectives to be able to help solve the problems. So I think that's very important. So kind of going a step further there, we're talking about breaking these barriers or filling that gap. I think you mentioned it was like a 3 million person skills gap in cybersecurity. How do we go about, or what are some of the steps that organizations go about trying to break these barriers or fill these gaps to accomplish the goal you mentioned of cybersecurity for all?
Ooh, so how can we do that? I mean, I think there are lots of different ways. One, I mean, ISC squared, which goes about helping people get certifications in the field of cybersecurity, is releasing new types of certifications regularly that are for different skill sets, right? So they typically, for a while had just the CISSP, which is very, very technical, quite difficult. But I think they've developed, different kind of cyber essential certifications that I think almost anyone could go and get. And I think if businesses can start to either require or incentivize their teams to go out and get those certifications, people might feel a bit better about entering a cybersecurity role with some of the basic kind of fundamentals. I also think that we should look at kind of having a KPI or a metric for every person within the business around cybersecurity. So whether it's taking a basic cyber awareness test, whether it's as a leader, if you're investing in technology or software, understanding how, the security of that system is going to be controlled, what that looks like. And I think just having that as part of our language around everything we do, how is it cyber secure? I think everyone will start to feel that they're much more involved and aware in kind of how businesses are looking at this problem.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point too, and to some extent it involves employees or individuals kind of taking some responsibility on their own too. So whether it's, I know here at Dell, it's kind of where I can speak on. It's we have a lot of different trainings we do. I feel like we're pretty good on terms of being the phishing, and we have a lot of like phishing tests that we do and monitor. But there's kind of a little bit of an onus on the individual to do that a little bit, whether it's from kind of that education perspective, and when you mentioned like the certifications, but it doesn't really even need to be that technical. Does it right? Cybersecurity, it doesn't have to necessarily be for like the CISO or anyone who's on a
Yeah,
dedicated cybersecurity team. There's almost I don't want to call it like a mandate, but looking at it from a strictly like it would be really nice to have this perspective. If everybody could get some level of education about cybersecurity, because it's not just affecting the security team anymore. Like you mentioned, like it's in hospitals. We got cyber attacks that are targeting school districts,
yeah,
governments. Everyone's going to be kind of affected by this. And they have to have some level of education about it. So
yeah,
just want to kind of expand on that fact a little bit. You touched on it a little bit, but education is really important, not only at the individual level, but also to some extent, like
yeah,
everybody needs to do their part and step up as to the cybersecurity for all aspect.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I think this has been a very good discussion. Before we end, is there one final piece of advice you'd like to offer to our audience? Something we might not have touched on, or something we want to emphasize again, just to a really final takeaway they can have about this topic?
Oh, so much to say in this field. I just think if you are listening, figure out how to get into the cybersecurity space. We need you. organizations need you. This is a big problem for the world. And whatever your skill set is, there is a role, a job, and a fit and a need as it relates to cybersecurity. So if you're a really great communicator, if you're a good problem solver, if you're really technical, if you're really good at operational command, all of those are things that we need, skills that we need more of in the cyber profession. So get this idea out of your head that it is highly technical, and roll up your sleeves. And it's really rewarding. As someone who's made that switch and done that, I'm really enjoying it. It's a really fascinating and exciting and difficult, and yeah, it's a great place to be.
Yeah. Kind of just going off that, I think I'll leave it at, every person matters. I know sometimes it's not just this, it's a lot of different issues, but it's, oh, there's so many people. Why should I do X, Y, Z? It's every
Yeah.
person matters. It only takes one, person not paying attention to an email or, clicking on a link to let some sort of cyber attackers in. So whatever you can do, there's some simple steps from just the education on the individual perspective, looking into, something like you mentioned, like the certifications, or even just really just trying to make yourself more cyber aware. This is affecting everybody. We all need to kind of take a little bit of responsibility here, but also from an organization level, I think we've mentioned it as well. We need help. We need everybody we can. We need different perspectives coming in to be able to help these problems because the cyber attackers aren't going to take a day off. They're not going to take they're not sleeping. We need help we can get. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had here, Liz. Thank you very much for this conversation. I think this is pretty enlightening on my end. So appreciate you coming on the podcast. And to our audience, as always, to learn more about Dell's security solutions, please visit dell.com/security solutions. And to hear more episodes of the Security Spotlight podcast, please listen to our episodes on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Liz, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Max. Speak soon.